Welcome to episode 6 of our BIO 110 podcast, where biology comes alive. Today, we're diving into metabolism, really breaking it into what it means and why it's such a critical piece of the puzzle for life as we know it.
Absolutely. Metabolism is essentially the grand sum of all the chemical reactions happening in every living organism. And to make it simpler, I usually break it into two types: catabolic and anabolic reactions. Imagine a cat pushing a water bottle off a ledge. That's catabolism. It's about breaking stuff down and releasing energy while doing it.
Wait, so catabolism is just the cell's version of a mischievous cat?
Exactly. That visual sticks, right? Now, on the flip side, we've got anabolism. It's all about building things up. Think of turning Lego bricks into a big, complex castle. It takes energy to create that final structure, so anabolic reactions are like your body's construction workers.
Got it. The breakdown fuels the buildup. But speaking of fuel, ATP seems to be the big player here. Can you shed some light on its role?
Oh, for sure. ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, is hands down the energy currency of life. It's like having your debit card ready for any transaction. You spend ATP to power everything in a cell, from contracting muscles to sending nerve signals.
And this spending, it's a pretty efficient system, right?
Efficient, yes, but here's the kicker. ATP works by breaking a high energy bond between one of its phosphate groups. That releases energy, which cells use immediately. It's kind of wild if you think about it. This one tiny molecule constantly cycles between being spent and recharged in every moment we're alive. And at its heart is this concept called Gibbs free energy, which boils down to whether a reaction releases or requires energy.
Okay, so it's like topping off your gas tank, useful for showing how much energy is available to do work. But what about the why? What does free energy even mean here?
Great question. Think of energy as money. Your Gibbs free energy is like your bank account. If you can spend energy, negative free energy, you'll get something done, like fueling movement or breaking bonds. But if you need to save up for something like building molecules, you'll require energy, so it's a positive free energy reaction.
That actually connects back to catabolic versus anabolic pathways. The spenders versus the savers, right?
Exactly. And what's fascinating is ATP itself is just constantly being recycled, like your paycheck. You may only have a small amount in circulation, but you keep earning and spending it in real time.
And this constant cycle is what makes life, well, keep moving forward. Mind-blowing. So where do we start unpacking how cells actually make and spend ATP?
Great question. And naturally, glycolysis is where it all begins. Exactly. Glycolysis is where it all begins, the starting line for cells making ATP. Now that we've laid down the foundation of energy and ATP cycling, let's break apart how this crucial process works step by step.
So wait, glycolysis, this is like step 1 in the ATP factory?
Exactly. It's the first stage of cellular respiration, and what's cool is it doesn't even need oxygen to get started. It happens right in the cytosol outside the mitochondria. Think of it as the foundation for everything that follows.
And there are 2 parts to this process, right? This investment phase and payoff phase you mentioned before?
Right. So in the investment phase, your cell actually spends 2 ATP molecules to kick things off. But then in the payoff phase, it generates 4 ATP. So there's a net gain of 2. Not super efficient, but hey, we're just getting started here.
Okay, so it's like you're putting down a deposit to double your returns. Why does glycolysis matter so much, though?
I love that analogy. And here's the thing. Glycolysis is critical because it works even when oxygen levels are low. Your cells can pinch hit with glycolysis during anaerobic conditions to keep producing some energy. That's a huge survival tool.
Okay, so glycolysis is the scrappy get-it-done stage. What about after that? What's the next move?
Well, after glycolysis, those pyruvates, basically sugar derivatives, move into the mitochondria if oxygen is available. And this is where the citric acid cycle, or Krebs cycle, picks up. It's all about extracting electrons, which are like tiny little batteries of energy from the carbon molecules in pyruvate.
So the electrons are the useful stuff, and the cycle just strips them away?
Kind of. The cycle also generates NADH and FADH2, two reduced coenzymes that act like delivery trucks for electrons. Our focus here isn't making a lot of ATP directly, but setting up for the electron transport chain where the magic happens.
Ah, the big finale. Walk me through that. Why is the electron transport chain the magic stage?
Okay, picture this. You've got a dam holding back water. If you release it all at once, the energy would just explode everywhere, chaotic and wasteful. But if you open controlled gates, the water flows steadily, generating power efficiently. That's oxidative phosphorylation in the electron transport chain.
Ah, so it's about precision. Efficient energy use instead of just burning everything out at once?
Exactly. Those electrons from NADH and FADH2 pass through a series of proteins, each siphoning off a little energy to pump protons across the mitochondrial membrane. This creates a concentration gradient, a kind of stored energy. Then, boom, ATP synthase uses that gradient to crank out ATP like a turbine. It's brilliant.
And I'm guessing this is where the lion's share of ATP comes from, right?
Oh, totally. The electron transport chain produces way more ATP than any earlier stage, roughly 30 out of the 36 total ATP molecules generated from one glucose unit.
Wow. So glycolysis scratches the surface, but oxidative phosphorylation is the real powerhouse. This whole system feels like such a finely tuned strategy.
It really is a kind of symphony where every stage sets the stage for the next. And speaking of stages, what happens when oxygen isn't around changes everything?
Okay, so you mentioned that when oxygen isn't around, everything changes. What does that shift look like in terms of how cells create energy? Does the whole system still function?
Oh, absolutely. Oxygen is a key player, especially in the electron transport chain. Without it, the entire chain just jams. Think of oxygen as the final electron acceptor. It's like the cleaner at the end of an assembly line. If it's not there to pull electrons away, everything backs up.
And I'm guessing this creates major problems for energy production?
Exactly. When oxygen runs low, your cells can't do oxidative phosphorylation, which is like the big moneymaker for ATP. Instead, they shift gears and rely entirely on glycolysis. But here's the catch. Glycolysis only makes 2 ATP per glucose. That's peanuts compared to what the mitochondria can crank out with oxygen.
Okay, so let's talk about what happens next. How do cells keep functioning with such little ATP?
Great question. So when oxygen's in short supply, cells turn to fermentation, a temporary emergency backup. This is where pyruvate, the product of glycolysis, gets converted into lactate. It's like a quick fix to regenerate NAD+, which glycolysis needs to keep running.
Ah, so it's like hitting the emergency power button. It keeps things going, but not for long?
Right. Think of athletes during high-intensity workouts, like sprinters or weightlifters. Their muscles use up oxygen faster than it's delivered, forcing a switch to fermentation.
Wait, isn't that the lactic acid everyone blames for sore muscles?
Actually, that's a bit of a myth. It's not lactic acid, it's lactate. Luckily, lactate gets cleared out pretty quickly once you catch your breath again. The body's super efficient like that.
So once oxygen is back, everything returns to normal?
Exactly. With oxygen, the mitochondria can kick back in, process the pyruvate, and basically reboot the whole system. What's wild is that your body juggles all this so seamlessly. It's like it's constantly assessing, do we have oxygen? Great, use it. Or no oxygen. All right, let's switch to plan B.
What a remarkable backup system. It's like biology's version of resilience.
Absolutely. And it highlights just how vital oxygen is, not just for generating energy efficiently, but for keeping us alive at all. It's the unsung hero of cellular respiration.
And on that note, we've covered quite the journey today. From glycolysis to the electron transport chain, and now the fascinating ways our cells adapt to oxygen deficiency. It's been incredible learning how our bodies manage energy under all kinds of conditions.
Thanks, Eric. This was fun. And hey, to our listeners, next time you're catching your breath after a workout, just remember the marvel of glycolysis and fermentation working overtime to keep you moving.
Couldn't have said it better. And that's all for today on the Bio 110 podcast. Don't forget to breathe, literally, and we'll see you next time. Take care.